All of these puzzles have one thing in common, and that is that they have been used in a national championship somewhere in the world in 2026. That's a nice big number of puzzles, and that's actually not all of them. 2026 has been full of national championships in jigsaw puzzling, all of them sponsored by Ravensburger from what it seems, and all of these puzzles were used in them. I have been lucky enough to participate in 4 of these championships as an international competitor, and also I have had friends who went to some of these other events, so I had the chance to try all of these puzzles out. And since I have a lot of unused footage of me doing these puzzles, I thought it would be a nice way to use all of them as a kind of compilation to take a look at all of the puzzles that have been used in these contests and just talk about them a little bit. If you are new here, then hi and welcome to the channel. I'm Fruji. I'm a speed puzzler from Hungary living in Germany, and I create content about speed puzzling and jigsaw puzzles in general and puzzling events and pretty much anything that relates to the hobby. Now, luckily for me, there are some puzzles that have been used in multiple competitions, so pretty much I get 2 birds with 1 stone in some cases, even though many of us would like to have unpublished puzzles at every single national championships, but for now that is still a dream. There are some countries that still don't get unpublished puzzles for their contests, but there's a lot of them that were competition exclusives, and those are especially exciting to do. The way that this video is going to work is that I'm going to separate each of these puzzles into chapters in the video, so I'll try to make your job easier as a viewer as well. So if you don't want to see all of them, but just want to cherry pick some of the more exciting puzzles for you, then you're going to also be able to do that. So you're going to be able to navigate the video itself. So what you're going to see is time lapses of these puzzles. Some of them are going to be in a competition environment where I was lucky enough to be a participant at the event, but also some time lapses from just the comfort of my home when I got some of these puzzles from a generous friend and I could try the puzzle myself. I hope you're going to enjoy this format now, and let's get to the video. The puzzles in this video are going to be kind of chronologically organized, so the first puzzle that we're going to take a look at is the solo final puzzle from the Danish Championship. After a full flip and pulling the edges, I decided to build the edge first. As per usual, I didn't get all the edge pieces, so I had to leave some of it floating. The edge is relatively straightforward though, with some mildly tricky parts in the bottom where there are multiple black parts. The good thing about this puzzle is that you can easily go section by section, as each sea creature has a slightly different color or pattern. My decision was to start with the girl's shirt, which stood out the most and has a slight gradient, but enough pattern in it so I can easily be able to tell which piece is what. Next, I pulled the sky and pretty much anything that was very clearly yellow, as I wanted to get that gradient sky out of the way as quickly as possible. I then pulled all pieces of the octopus, but put them aside to rather do anything with spots. I might have said that each animal has a recognizably different pattern or color, which applies to these 2 as well, but I still struggled a bit here. Next up were the very black pieces of the orca. I should have gone with this part way earlier, and that's a bit of general wisdom here. Go with those black pieces when there are not too many of them, because they are usually easier than they look. After the Medusa, I felt ready to go for the octopus, which was, again, trickier than it looked because of the arms that are all around. I still had the walrus to go, which was just a few pieces to fill in, leaving me with just a background to work on. With all the fun parts of the puzzle already done, I only had different blues and whites to go with, which I knew would be the hardest part for me. I try and follow the different shades of blue and a lot of shape work. I had pretty much only the blues left with 3940, so the last around 50 pieces took me over 5 minutes here. Next up is the Swedish Championship final puzzle, and I have a full video on the Swedish Championship, so I'm not going to go into too much detail here. If you want to know more about how that competition went, just check out that video. Suffice to say, I love this puzzle, and it's probably one of my favorite championship puzzles. Same thing applies for the Belgian Jigsaw Puzzle Championship final puzzle, which was also used in Sweden. If you want to know more about that competition, then take a look at my other video that I have made about it. To quickly summarize, this was probably my most difficult championship puzzle this year. I struggled very hard with this one. Moving on to the US Nationals puzzles. This competition is always extremely exciting to watch for me, especially because every single puzzle they use is unpublished. Thanks so much to Michelle, who lent me her copies so I could try almost all of them. First up is Tropical Vibes by Louise Marion, who you will still hear of in this video later. I think this is one of those images where at first glance it seems pretty easy, but then turns out to be a way more difficult one than you'd think. I went for a bit of the edge first while also pulling the pieces of the sea in the middle. I like this puzzle very much because you can do a little bit of everything as you go. This attempt on the video was also not my first one, so I already had an idea of what I am doing and I could go more section by section than at the first try. The two very obvious places to start for me were the building on the left and the stripy awning. I went for the red flowers in the middle, then did those 10 pieces in the middle and finished the top edge too. This way, I kind of had a skeleton for the puzzle with a reference point pretty much everywhere I looked. My next choice was the fence in the middle because it connects to the red flowers and it is small enough that the lines are easy to figure out. With that done, I ended up bouncing around the different elements of the image, doing the blue building and some flowers in the bottom. The good thing about this image is that it has very clearly different sections and not much overlap between them, so whatever you decide to pull, you can be pretty sure about where it will go. This doesn't make the puzzle an easy one though. Flowers are typically challenging by themselves, but once you have all the clear elements out of the way, you are left with a lot of murky green and the gradient sky. I cleaned up that chaos by going for the yellow part of the sky first, but once that was done, I was left with the greens and that sky section that you would probably assume to be easier, but the palm leaves actually make this quite tricky. There's no good advice that I can really give you here. I tried following the gradient, but because it's broken up in so many places, it's just quite difficult for me, to be honest. So I was doing a lot of shape work and just trying to survive in this puzzle at the end. The second preliminary puzzle is the Atlanta Skyline. I have to admit this is my least favorite image of the batch because of the big gradient sky that it has on there. A fun fact about this image is that this is on one of the signs that welcome you to Atlanta when you arrive to the airport. I find that this is a pretty neat little idea to commemorate where US Nationals was this year, though I am not sure if this was actually a conscious decision. I feel like this is one of the more difficult images of the prelim rounds, not only because of the huge sky, but also because the cityscape is not easy to navigate. It ends up being super busy, and for me, it was quite hard to see what is what on the pieces. The image can be divided into three very distinctly different areas: the foreground with the park, the city, and the sky. The bottom part is still the easier section, so I started with that. The greens of the park stand out quite well, and that overpass that runs across the puzzle is also quite straightforward. From then on, it is only downhill, for me at least. Gradients are super challenging for me, and I keep having the feeling that I might not see colors as well as other people do, because apart from the very clearly darker or lighter colors, I really have a hard time guessing what color I am looking at. Building the edges of the buildings where they meet the sky can help a lot to then go a bit by shape of the pieces as well. And even though I generally try to leave sky sections last in almost every speed puzzle I do, here I ended up finishing on the buildings because I found it easier to fill the gaps than to pick and place that section. The last of the solo preliminary puzzles I managed to do is Front Porch Days. This was the slightly more controversial images of the competition because US Nationals has an amazing lineup of popular artists, but this one is basically just a stock image with a cat and a dog placed on the rug in the middle. This also means that if you were competing in the event, it was sheer luck if you were in a round where you received a cool artist's artwork or just a stock picture. As a speed puzzle image, though, this was a pretty good one, to be honest. Really sortable, but the individual sections can be quite tricky. The US flag is a pretty obvious place to start, so much so that I did it before beginning to build the edge. I also pulled everything yellow to begin with, which cleans up the field a little, but also gives me a project that I can grab anytime I don't know what to do next. The chairs are also super recognizable. You can even tell which one is which relatively easily, as shown by the floating small chair that I placed in the middle. The ceiling was an area that I ended up putting together at random because its pieces were just super recognizable, so I just grabbed them whenever I found one. Time for the yellow segment, and this is the first example that I mean by saying the individual segments can be tricky. There are some lines that you can build quite well, but figuring out which way they point can be quite hard. This is also why I ended up having a line on the side, because I just couldn't figure out which way it is pointing. The other example of this is the columns that are easy enough to pull, but again, they are just lines that you can't necessarily immediately place the right way. At this point in the puzzle, there was a quite clear skeleton that I had to fill in with content. That content being the window and the greenery in the background. It is easier than it looks because they are pretty small chunks, but it was also quite tricky, and that was the end of the puzzle. The solo final puzzle of the US Nationals was a surprise for everyone, as it was a circle puzzle. This form can be pretty divisive among speed puzzlers. Some love it, some hate it. I am actually quite indifferent with circle puzzles. I don't mind them, but it also doesn't make me overly enthusiastic when I get one at a competition. I always feel like, especially to us Europeans who very rarely do any random puzzles, the circle puzzles are more of a challenge just because we are so used to the ribbon cut and rectangular form. I pulled the edge first and assembled it, especially because I am not used to circle puzzles, and having the edge gives me a better idea of how large the image is going to be. Unusually for me, I went straight for the sky, but here it is quite justified because the blue stands out very much from the rest of the pieces. Assembling it is a different story. The shapes mess with my head, and it feels like it is taking way longer than it normally should. The skyscrapers came together as a side note to the sky. It was not really intentional. I basically just kept finding the pieces that belonged there. My next step was to work on the bridge, since it runs through the whole puzzle and gives good reference for placing other things. The challenging thing about this image is that, contrary to the usual Ravensburger circle puzzles, it is not a gradient circular image, just a normally oriented picture, so you can't really go the way you would normally approach a circle of colors puzzle to basically go color by color. The front part of the bridge was actually a little bit harder than I expected, so I set that aside and assembled the water. After that, all that I was left with is these bridge parts and the flowers and other assorted foliage. I do think that on this puzzle, the piece cut helps a lot, but also the artist has added a couple of small details that help you find the way through the image. An example of that is the little squirrel on the side. I'm not going to lie though, I struggled finishing this puzzle a lot, and I was super happy that I finished it in under an hour on my first attempt and almost under 50 on my second. In this video, I was trying to only include solo puzzles, otherwise it would have been way too long. Therefore, I am very happy that this puzzle from the pair round of US Nationals was also used at the Portuguese Championship in solo, so I can include it in the list. There will be more exceptions if you keep watching. There were some puzzles that I couldn't resist adding. This puzzle is complete madness, and I love every bit of it. With an extremely busy puzzle like this, it can always be a good idea to start on the edge because it gives you a reference for pick and placing. As much as I love a good pick and place though, I feel like this image is actually too busy for finding things in the picture quickly, so what I found best here is to look for patterns and backgrounds. By that, I mean going for things like the net running down from the cake, or the melon on the side, or the ball pit in the bottom, or the octopus on the right. All this still doesn't make this puzzle easy. There is just so much going on and so many funny little details. With every solve, this puzzle just keeps on giving. Why is this cake so upset? And why do the cats play the bongos? I really don't know, but I'm here for all of it, and I'm always very happy to do this puzzle. Moving back to the European continent to a puzzle that has been used in multiple competitions. People have been extremely happy with it all around, as this is a great one. What makes this image a really good speed puzzle is that it has very clearly defined sections that are easily recognizable and sortable. Me being me, I bounced around elements of the image, doing a little bit of everything all at once. For me, the most convenient place to start was the one relatively busy part with the campsite, while also sorting the pieces for the planets that have a very characteristic color. By having the planets assembled, you also get sucked into doing the full sky. The good thing about it is that it is not as many pieces actually, and the gradient is very distinct, so you can navigate it pretty well. The water also stands out quite a lot, and the texture of the two separate water sections help you navigate which one is which. I then completed the beach as it grows kind of naturally out of the water, and it's a very evident choice to go on with. Once these sections are done, though, we get to the trickier parts of the image. The rest of the water is also a gradient, but it is also broken up by the tree in the middle. The left side of the image with the trees and hills has generally been left for the very end by most puzzlers that I have seen, and I am no exception. It is clearly the hardest part of the image. Here you can still go by texture and follow the lines of the trees, but this part is nevertheless the challenging part of the puzzle. We are arriving to the puzzle I have received in my preliminary round at the German Championship. When I saw the campsite puzzle in the first round, I was pretty sure we would get this image because they somehow have been moving together on the internet, and I was actually pretty nervous about it because of the huge sky section, which is my arch nemesis. It was pretty obvious for me from the start that I would go from the bottom of the image to the top because, of course, the stuff being in the bottom, I had to do that part first. So I first worked on the pavement, where there is actually more pattern and lines that help you navigate than you would actually expect at first glance. And then I moved on to the big diner sign as the letters and background colors stood out nicely. From this point onwards, my plan of bottom to top also changed a bit as I ended up going for the bottom section of the sky, partly because it was also very noticeable among the pieces, and partly because it also gave me a frame to the street segment, so I had more reference point to build the diner itself. The diner section was really the fun part for me, and once that was done, all I had left was that big sky section, which is over a third of the image. I still try to do anything that is not sky, meaning the leaves on top. After that done, it really is just the sky or a mess of clouds or whatever those colors are. I don't think I have a good strategy for this, so I have to get back my copy of the puzzle that I lent to someone so that I can practice this a little bit more. I am relatively happy with my time that I got at the competition, which landed me on 30th place out of 221 competitors. The final puzzle of the German Championship was an unreleased image that at least I have never seen before, and as far as I know, it is not very easily available at the moment. It is not unusual for me to start with the edge. You probably noticed that already in this video, but the reason I did it here is that I was trying to come up with what to do strategy-wise. It was an attractive choice to try and sort the girl and starburst from there, but I ended up choosing a different way and I sorted the yellow pieces to figure out the background first. In hindsight, I think this was a really good strategy. It cleaned up the space really well, and I had a good amount of negative space to work for the rest of the puzzle to fall into place. By choosing the yellow wall, I also could do a bit of pick and placing, which I just enjoy very much. Along with the yellows, I also ended up assembling the red elements, meaning the shelf and the picture frame. From here on, I think I had way less structure to what I was doing than I intended. Parts of the image just came together without me really focusing them specifically. I think the most challenging parts of this puzzle were the floor and carpet, along with the plants. Even though each plant had a slightly different color, so you could tell which piece is what relatively confidently, but because the plants are scattered all around the image, it does eat up a bit of time as you're trying to figure that out. I have to admit I felt way faster doing this puzzle than I actually was, and I was a little bit disappointed with my result, even though it is not a bad time at all. Finishing with a time of exactly 48 minutes put me into 35th place in the championship final. I honestly felt like I was done in around 42 minutes, but oh well, next time it will be faster. This puzzle is probably as viral right now as a puzzle can get in speed puzzle circles. It is not only a really fun Disney Pixar puzzle, it is also a super fast one, so I am really happy I can include it here because it was used in the solo round of Slovenian Nationals. This one has been done over 2,000 times by the community on My Speed Puzzling, and for a very good reason. It is a super speedy puzzle for many, many reasons. My strategy for this was basically a full pick and place without even doing a full flip, so instead of talking strategy, or lack thereof in my case, let's just talk about what makes this puzzle so fast in my opinion. Be prepared for some speed puzzle nerdy deep dive here. First of all, pretty much everyone knows these characters, so there is very little brain power going into attempting to recognize what is on a piece. This decreases your reaction time for each piece, therefore, it makes assembly a lot faster. Even if you are not that super familiar with the characters, you can still use the background colors of each tile, which gives you a relative idea for the pieces that you get. So you have very few pieces that you're going to pick up, look at, and then have to drop without at least having a general idea of where it will go. It is also a great speedrun puzzle because obviously the more you assemble it, the more you will know where each character is. So with repeated attempts, you can get significantly faster. I have done this puzzle 3 times at this point and have managed to get my first sub 30 time with it, so I can only recommend using this puzzle for practicing pure speed. Oh boy, the snowy owl from Finnish Nationals is a hard one. It is also one of those images that at first glance, when you are not puzzling yourself, seems okay enough, but then it shows you its teeth. I was watching the live stream of the competition, and when I saw the image, I really thought it would be a pretty fast puzzle. I guess I never realized how much of that sky really is there. It is also a vertical image, which can somehow trip up more people, but I think that is not necessarily what makes this puzzle hard. The beginning of the puzzle is pretty okay. You can go from bottom to top. The grass is really just 3 rows or something, so you can figure it out quite quickly. The green pieces also stand out quite well, so you can pull them relatively easily. Each plant is its own color and texture, so they can also be done quite nicely, and they also already bring together a good portion of the mound of earth that the owl is sitting on. Flowers being flowers, they are a little tricky to place, but honestly, compared to what is around the corner as the next part of the puzzle, they still feel pretty easy. Once these bottom parts of the image were done, I also flipped the puzzle to have better access to the pieces. Some people immediately start vertical puzzles as a horizontal image to not deviate too much from their usual moves and orientation they use on a horizontal image. 2 things I assembled before even touching the sky were the owl and that sun in the middle, since obviously these had very recognizable pieces. The owl was already a little tricky, but still manageable. It's not too many pieces so that you can figure out the pattern quite nicely. However, tackling the sky is the real challenge here. I, of course, pulled anything that was clouds. Still, I had around 40 pieces of sky to go once the clouds were assembled. Not managing otherwise, I did a rough shape sort to maybe help me a bit, but it didn't really make much faster either. It's really just a guessing game. I need to practice shape sorting and working my shape a little bit more, I think, as well, because I keep feeling like I could sort and be way more efficient if I paid a little bit more attention to how I'm doing it. This puzzle is really just a game of survival. I don't feel like the pattern of the sky helped me at all around the end, and I'm really just glad I finished it in less than an hour. This next puzzle is also one of those that are as far from my personal preference as they can get. I honestly don't understand how the winner of Czech Nationals did this in less than 27 minutes, and the top 7 did it in under 40 minutes. An entire puzzle of gradient blues with sky and water, just one island in the middle that is just a block of color, really, and just that tiny coral reef counting as something busy in the middle is a real struggle for me. I obviously needed an emotional support edge here because I had no idea how I would navigate this puzzle. First thing I wanted to do was the line between the water and the sky, since it runs through the whole puzzle, dividing it into 2 parts. Since the pieces of the island stood out better, I went for that. While doing all that, I was also grabbing pieces of the corals already, just to have them at hand once I am done with the island, so I can move on to that immediately. Once these 2 sections were done, though, I started my struggle with the image. I pretty much just had blotches of blue all around, and even though the water pieces could be differentiated pretty well from the sky pieces, that didn't help me with assembly whatsoever, to be honest. Once I had just the sky left, it was time for me to again do a little shape sort to hopefully help me, and at least I managed to finish in under an hour again. It's really, really not my puzzle. This puzzle was used as a pair puzzle in Slovenia, and I can completely see why. That division smack in the middle of the puzzle makes it a lovely pair puzzle because it gives a task for each member of the pair. And I sure wish I had a pair partner with me for this one. Moving on to a puzzle used first in the UK, then in Italy, with an image by Angela Holland. This is one of those puzzles I really wish I got at a live competition. It is such a fun image with so many things going on, there is always something new to notice. Angela Holland has some very beloved puzzle images, and I think she is generally popular among puzzlers. I am extra happy that I have a signed copy of this puzzle. What I find great about this image is that even though it is busy, it can be broken down into clear sections. The sky, the yurt, if that's what it's called, the stripy caravan top, and even the trees, though you might notice that I kept putting off doing one of the trees on the top left. All of these are really good parts to begin with because they are super sortable, along with the water, which is just 2.5 rows in the bottom, so it is good to have it out of the way pretty early on. The rest of the image is pretty much pick and placing whatever you find, to be honest. The best advice that I can give for any of these really heavily pick and place puzzles is to only ever pick up pieces that you instantly recognize. This way, you can build a great net of pieces that give you an increasing amount of reference for the rest of the pieces that might be harder to place. I have done this puzzle multiple times at this point, and interestingly, I always end with the tent on the left. I guess it's because of the lines and that weird shape that I somehow find awkward to figure out, and it always takes a bit longer than I would assume. The puzzle used in the second preliminary round of UK Nationals is a really special one, as it is depicting a puzzle competition. It is a tricky image though, way more difficult than the other preliminary rounds puzzle. I have only known one image by Eleanor Tomlinson before, which is a dog puzzle I thought is super charming, so I was quite excited when this artist was announced for the UK Championship. For me, the most obvious place to start on this puzzle was the red banner above the puzzlers, then to move on to the table and the people. I did quite a bit of assembly without any edges for a good while, the main reason being that the top and bottom edge are both mostly white, so I thought they would take too long without some context I could build earlier. It was definitely more difficult to put together the edge, and I mostly brought in chunks of it when I had a segment connecting to it already. Also, you can probably notice that these pieces are mostly white, so my best strategy was to try and recognize any feature on a piece, place it where it might go, and hope for the best that it is the right orientation and location. One thing I am super happy I noticed early on is that the bottom white segment has puzzle pieces scattered around, while the top white segment has blotches of paint. That helps a lot with late stage assembly, but it still doesn't help you too much, unfortunately. I ended up with around 40 mostly white pieces with minimal colors on them at the end, so those were not easy at all. I mostly kept looking for the tiniest details I could find that would help me determine what might be on the piece, and I also very much relied on piece shape as well. But thankfully, I didn't need to shape sort on this puzzle. Unfortunately, I didn't manage to get around to the UK final puzzle, so we are moving on to Canadian Nationals. This competition has also been getting some great puzzles this year, and I'm extremely happy I got to try these. First up is a rare photograph puzzle. If you have been paying attention, you have noticed that an overwhelming majority of the puzzles used at competitions are illustrations now, so I am actually pretty happy whenever a photo pops up. A photo is a completely different beast compared to illustrations, so it gives you some great variety. This image can be divided into very clear sections. If you're an upfront sorter, you would be having a field day on this puzzle. Each building can be sorted super well. The sky is also very distinct, and there's thankfully not too many pieces, and it even has a slight gradient hidden in there. For this puzzle, what I found most useful was to go with the smallest and most distinct sections first. For me, that meant the smaller buildings on the left side, the roofs, and then actually the sky because of its very clear color, plus the added bonus of the roofs already giving kind of a frame to the sky pieces to be filled into. Once done with the larger blue building in the front, I also started tackling the lower segment of the image with the sidewalk and shop fronts, which interestingly was the hardest part for me, and I found the doors and plants weirdly confusing. The two brick buildings have a very similar color, but the texture of the bricks is very different, so even here you can go from one building to the next. With the last brick building, I think if I had to do it in isolation, I would have had a hard time with it, but because it is already surrounded by assembled puzzle, I could just fill the gap and use the shapes to finish. When I first saw the image used in the solo final of Canadian Nationals, I got pretty excited. At first glance, it seemed like a perfect challenge that I can imagine for myself at the point where I am at in speed puzzling. It also reminded me of the puzzle at the 2024 World Championship somehow, which has been a super hard puzzle for me, so I was excited about the opportunity to do this puzzle. I didn't know much about the artist before he was announced as a featured artist for the championship, but now I am really glad I found out about his work, because even though this image is not necessarily my style, I have found some other puzzles by him that I now would love to do at some point. This is probably one of the biggest benefits of having featured artists at puzzle championships, that more people get to know them. This image is an illustration with mostly green tones and a lot of plants all around, but it is also quite busy and it has so many little details in there. The way I went into this puzzle was to test out the, for lack of a better word, going color by color system. So I would pull everything that is white or blue or red or orange, and then I would go with all the little flowers and everything that is that big bird on the left, and that peacock pattern. So first colors, then patterns, and trying to complete as much of the puzzle as possible before going for the turtle or the tree, which for me were without doubt the most difficult elements in the image. I also feel like this is an ideal image for the final puzzle at the championship because it tests many different skills all at once, and you don't necessarily have to rely on just one ideal strategy to assemble this puzzle. For the next two puzzles, I am breaking the pattern of only showing solo championship puzzles, but I promise I have a good reason including these, and that is because I had an outstanding pair partner to try them with. It is Wiktor from Poland, all-around champion puzzler, who was kind enough to let me film us puzzling these two. Louise Marion was a featured artist at US Nationals, and I loved that puzzle, so I definitely wanted to get this one from Canadian Nationals, and a friend was kind enough to get this one for me. The rest of the Canadian puzzles I borrowed from him, so a big thank you here. So when puzzling with someone as fast as Wiktor is, my main goal would be to just take on a support role and let him do his thing. That meant that even though I know he prefers to be a sorter actually, I ended up sorting a lot and basically feeding him things to do. I love this move that Wiktor does here to get the water pieces closer to himself. Some things I could sort pretty well, meaning the water, the rooftops, the sky, the walls of the buildings, and the rest ended up being an assortment of pieces that would fill the gaps later. This puzzle is much more tricky than what it looked like at first glance. We also ended up doing a lot of pick and placing as well, I think mostly because I have assembled smaller parts, like 3-4 pieces, and handed them over to Wiktor, who has placed them in the puzzle, so we could work from there. I'm also unreasonably proud that at the time of recording this, we still have the fastest time on my speed puzzling on this puzzle, with 21 minutes and 22 seconds. The second pair puzzle is an image that, had I had to puzzle it alone, I would most likely have not enjoyed it at all. Images like this with so many plants are super hard for me, so I am very happy that I got to assemble this with a pair. For this puzzle, I went with the same idea as the first one. I tried sorting as much as possible, even though with a puzzle like this, I have a hard time seeing what is what as well. The best way I could figure out the image was to sort any of the pots that the plants were in, since those have a super distinct color, and once Wiktor assembled those, thankfully, there was a manageable structure of the image to work with, since it could be divided into clear parts. It's still not an easy pair puzzle though, by any means, primarily because there are so many little plants that take up only 1, 2, 3 pieces, which usually makes working in a pair a bit harder since it is more difficult to distribute tasks between each other. Also, since the elements are so small, sorting is also a bit more scattered. You can't just pile 20 pieces together and say that is this thing on the image. You have to go into much more little details. We still managed to finish the puzzle in 24 minutes and 12 seconds, so I am in no way complaining. This was really fun. I should have counted how many times I said I don't know what I'm looking at though. And with that, we arrive to the last two puzzles of this video, which are from this year's Dutch Nationals. I was super happy to get this puzzle because it is one of those images that I have always wanted to try but never got to. As far as I know, this is from the UK catalog, so I never found it in shops in Germany, but at last, here it was! What is amazing about this image is that it has such clear sections that you can divide it into. You can see, even as I am doing the flip in the beginning, I am already doing some sorting of the lady and the sign along with the edges because they just stood out so much I couldn't focus on the edge itself. I also pulled the pieces of the bench very early on. I wanted to have the edge done quick though, so that whenever I am done with a section, I can already place it inside the picture. This way I could also keep using them as a reference for everything else. That is exactly how the whole platform got built, as like an afterthought, as I went on to sort the tracks, for example. The pieces of the train also just fell into place at random, to be honest. I only thought of doing the horizon a little late in the game, which might have been a slight mistake. It would probably have helped a lot with orientation. After this, I only had the real challenging sections of the puzzle left, meaning the train tracks and the sky. By now, you probably know me enough to guess that I wanted to avoid the sky for as long as I could, so I tackled the train tracks first. And this is where my battle started. Once I had only the sky pieces left, I looked up at the clock for a brief second because I was interested, and I was at around 38 minutes, so the rest of my time was just the sky, and struggle I did with that. I even shape sorted because I could see no rhyme or reason in the sky pieces, and I ended up spending almost 9 minutes on those last 50 pieces, which was very sad. It was not an enjoyable time, but I was very happy to finish the puzzle, and I was also really surprised that I finished under 50 minutes, to be honest. The solo final puzzle of the Dutch Championship was a surprise because I think nobody expected a Christmas-themed puzzle in June. I was so very happy when I saw this image, which was completely new to me and I have never seen it before, since this is exactly my style. Generally, when I get to the final round of a competition, I'm not nervous at all because I got to the final, I get to puzzle until the very end. I usually know full well that I am not going to be among the top 3 finishers, so I'm just happy to be there. This was a little different though, because I have been trying to finally get a sub 40-minute finish at a live competition this year, and so far I have been sometimes close, but not exactly there, and with this puzzle, I knew I had a chance to reach that goal. I assembled a rough edge to get an idea of the image as usual, then I went for the armchair, which has a very distinct color, so it was easy to sort. With that done though, I ended up doing a lot of pick and placing in the bottom left busy area while working on the dark brown table next. However, I kept being distracted by pieces that I have recognized, so I also assembled bits and pieces of the shelf in the back, and it was probably at this point where I let go of having a structure and I just placed whatever I instantly recognized. The 3 areas I was left with in the end were the 2 windows and the Christmas tree, and since I wasn't sure yet how I'm going to tell the difference between the 2 windows, I went for the tree. At this point, because I had the surroundings of the tree pretty much assembled, I could figure it out relatively quickly, while I also tried sometimes checking the image to get a glimpse at what those windows have that I can use later. One thing I managed to notice was that the wreaths in each of the windows were different, one having golden balls and the other having stars, even though that gave me just a little to go by. It was mostly guesswork, the color differences were somehow not that clearly visible to me. I didn't manage to get a sub 40, I also wasn't super close, I finished in 42:45. Probably, if I didn't go as chaotic as I did, I could have saved those couple of minutes, so I will see at an upcoming competition if I can make it next time. Alright, that was a lot of puzzles, but we have made it through! These were the National Championship puzzles of 2026 from around the world that I have managed to get. I really hope that you enjoyed seeing all of these puzzles in action. If you have been to any of these competitions or you have just done the puzzles yourself, then leave a comment below and tell me about your experience, because I also love hearing other people's opinions and it's just fun to chat puzzles, so let's continue that in the comments. There's now a little bit of a summer break coming, there's not that many events, but I'm also super behind on different events that I have wanted to make videos about. But there's a lot of other content coming as well, so subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, not to miss out on anything puzzles. Thank you so much for watching and see you in the next video.